The tale of Ravenwood Forest had been passed down through generations, whispered around campfires and scrawled in dusty tomes. It was said that deep within its heart lay an ancient artifact, a mirror so cursed that it could reveal not just your reflection, but your darkest secrets, deepest fears, and most forbidden desires. Those who dared to gaze into its surface were never the same again. Some claimed they saw visions of alternate lives. Others swore they heard voices calling their names from within the glass. And then there were those who simply disappeared, leaving behind only rumors and regret. Evelyn Harper first heard of the Cursed Mirror during her university days while studying folklore and mythology. A professor mentioned it briefly during a lecture on cursed objects, dismissing it as mere superstition. But something about the story lingered in Evelyn's mind long after the class ended. She couldn't shake the image of a gleaming mirror standing alone in a darkened forest, waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to uncover its secrets. Now, years later, Evelyn was no longer content to let legends remain unproven. As a historian specializing in forgotten myths, she had made it her life's mission to separate fact from fiction. Armed with research notes, maps, and an insatiable curiosity, she decided to venture into Ravenwood Forest herself. If the mirror existed, and if she could find it, it would be the discovery of a lifetime. But as she packed her bag late one evening, Evelyn felt a pang of unease. Her hands trembled slightly as she tucked her journal into her satchel. Was this truly worth risking everything for? Shaking off the doubt, she reminded herself why she started this journey in the first place: to seek truth, no matter how dangerous or unsettling it might be. The sun dipped below the horizon as Evelyn approached the edge of Ravenwood Forest. The air grew colder with every step, and the trees loomed taller, their gnarled branches twisting skyward like skeletal fingers. She paused at the threshold, staring into the dense canopy ahead. Moonlight filtered weakly through the leaves, casting dappled patterns on the forest floor. It was beautiful in a haunting way, like nature itself had conspired to create a labyrinth designed to trap wanderers. Evelyn adjusted the strap of her lantern, its soft glow barely penetrating the gloom. She took a deep breath, steeling herself against the creeping sense of dread that threatened to overwhelm her. "You've faced worse," she muttered under her breath. "This is just another expedition." But even as she stepped forward, the forest seemed alive. Every rustle of leaves sounded like footsteps following her. Every snap of a twig echoed unnaturally loud in the silence. She tried to rationalize the noises: wind, animals, her own imagination. But the hairs on the back of her neck refused to lie flat. After what felt like hours, Evelyn stopped to check her map. The lantern's flickering light illuminated faded ink and hastily scribbled notes. According to her calculations, she should have reached the ruins of an old manor by now. But all she saw were endless rows of trees stretching into darkness. Frustration bubbled up inside her, but she forced herself to stay calm. Getting lost wouldn't help anyone. As she continued walking, the whispers began. At first they were faint, almost indistinguishable from the wind. But soon they grew clearer, soft murmurs that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. They spoke in languages she didn't understand, yet somehow she knew they were meant for her ears alone. "Turn back," one voice hissed. "You don't belong here," another warned. Evelyn clenched her fists, refusing to give in to fear. "I'm not turning back," she whispered defiantly. "Not until I find the truth." The farther Evelyn ventured into the forest, the louder the whispers became. They swirled around her like a storm, overlapping and contradicting each other. Some urged her to flee, others promised answers if she kept going. The cacophony was maddening, making it hard to focus on anything else. She stopped abruptly when she noticed something peculiar: faint lights dancing between the trees. At first she thought they were fireflies, but they moved too deliberately, weaving intricate patterns in the air. Then came the laughter, a high-pitched giggle that sent shivers down her spine. It sounded close, almost right beside her, but when she turned, there was nothing there. Her heart pounded as she pressed onward, clutching her lantern tighter. The path, if it could even be called that, was overgrown with roots and brambles that snagged at her boots and cloak. Every step felt heavier than the last, as though the forest itself was trying to slow her down. Finally, exhaustion set in. Evelyn leaned against a tree, closing her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, the lights were gone, replaced by an eerie stillness. For the first time since entering Ravenwood, she felt utterly alone. And then she heard it, a low, guttural growl emanating from the shadows. Her blood ran cold as two glowing eyes appeared in the distance, watching her intently. Without thinking, she bolted, her lantern swinging wildly as she sprinted through the forest. Branches clawed at her face, and her breath came in ragged gasps, but she didn't stop until the eyes vanished behind her. When she finally collapsed to her knees, panting and trembling, she realized something strange. The forest felt quieter, almost peaceful. Had whatever was chasing her given up, or was it merely biding its time? The mirror stood out starkly against the decay surrounding it, almost as if it didn't belong in this ruined world. Its surface shimmered faintly, catching the dim light of Evelyn's lantern and reflecting it back with an unnatural clarity. For a moment, she thought she saw her own face smiling back at her, but then she realized it wasn't her smile. It was colder, sharper, and infinitely more knowing. Evelyn froze, her breath catching in her throat. She blinked rapidly, trying to convince herself it was just fatigue playing tricks on her mind. But when she opened her eyes again, the face in the mirror hadn't moved in sync with hers. Instead, it tilted its head slightly, studying her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. "Hello," Evelyn whispered, her voice trembling. There was no response, only the faint hum emanating from the glass, growing louder with each passing second. The sound vibrated through her bones, resonating deep within her chest until it became almost unbearable. She took a step back, her instincts screaming at her to leave, but curiosity rooted her to the spot. What was this thing? Was it truly cursed, as the legends claimed? Or was it simply an illusion designed to frighten intruders? Before she could decide, the mirror's surface rippled like water disturbed by a stone. A dark shape emerged from the depths, swirling and twisting until it formed a pair of glowing eyes identical to the ones she'd seen earlier in the forest. Evelyn stumbled backward, dropping her lantern. The flame flickered wildly, casting grotesque shadows across the walls. "You shouldn't have come here," a deep, otherworldly voice rumbled. "But now that you're here, you might as well see what lies beyond." The voice reverberated through the room, bouncing off the walls and filling Evelyn's ears with its haunting cadence. It wasn't angry or threatening, It was calm, almost soothing, which somehow made it even more terrifying. Evelyn scrambled to pick up her lantern, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped it again. Who are you?" she stammered, clutching the lantern like a lifeline. "What do you want?" "I am the keeper of memories," the voice replied. "The witness to sins, the bearer of curses. Look closely, Evelyn Harper, and see what lies beyond your own reflection." Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. How did it know her name? She glanced around the room, searching for some hidden speaker or ventriloquist trick, but there was nothing. Just the mirror and the endless void behind it. Against her better judgment, she turned back to the mirror. Her reflection stared back at her, wide-eyed and pale, but the face in the glass remained eerily composed. Slowly it raised a hand, beckoning her closer. "No," Evelyn whispered, shaking her head. "This isn't real. None of this is real." "Oh, but it is," the voice purred. "And once you look into my depths, there will be no turning back." Evelyn staggered backward, breaking free from the vision. Her knees buckled and she collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air. Tears streamed down her face as she tried to process what she'd just seen. Were those futures real? Alternate lives waiting to unfold based on her decisions? Or was the mirror manipulating her mind, planting doubts and fears? "You don't understand," she sobbed. "I didn't ask for this. I just wanted answers." "The truth is rarely kind," the voice replied. "But now that you've glimpsed it, you cannot unsee it. The question is, what will you do next?" Evelyn's mind raced. Part of her wanted to flee the manor and never look back. But another part, the stubborn, curious historian within her, refused to give up. If the mirror held secrets about Ravenwood and its history, she owed it to herself, and to future generations, to uncover them. Summoning what little courage she had left, Evelyn rose to her feet. "Show me more," she demanded, her voice steadier than she expected. "I need to know everything." The mirror's surface rippled again, and the voice chuckled softly. "Very well, but remember, knowledge comes at a cost." The mirror's surface shimmered ominously, responding to Evelyn's demand for more knowledge. Its voice grew colder, more menacing, as it whispered promises of revelation, but also warnings of peril. "You seek answers," it hissed, "but are you prepared to face the consequences?" Evelyn hesitated, her resolve wavering under the weight of uncertainty. The vision she'd already witnessed, the glittering wealth and the desolate wasteland, had shaken her to her core. Yet something deep within her refused to back down. She had come this far. She couldn't leave without understanding the full scope of the mirror's power. "I'm not afraid," she lied, her voice trembling despite her bravado. "Show me what I need to see." The mirror's surface rippled violently like water disturbed by a storm. Suddenly, flames erupted from its depths, engulfing the room in an inferno of heat and light. Evelyn screamed, shielding her face as the fire spread rapidly, consuming everything in its path. The once decaying furniture ignited instantly, and the walls blackened with soot. In the chaos, Evelyn noticed something strange. The mirror itself wasn't burning. Instead, it pulsed with an otherworldly energy, drawing her closer even as the flames licked at her skin. Dark tendrils snaked out from the glass, wrapping around her arms and pulling her toward the fiery abyss. "No!" she shouted, struggling against the unseen force. "Let me go!" The mirror's laughter echoed through the inferno, mocking her desperation. "You cannot escape now," it taunted. "Once you've looked into my depths, you belong to me." Evelyn fought with every ounce of strength she had, clawing at the tendrils that held her captive. But they were unyielding, tightening their grip until she could barely breathe. Just when she thought she would be consumed entirely, the flames subsided as suddenly as they had appeared, leaving the room eerily silent. When the smoke cleared, Evelyn found herself lying on the floor, dazed and disoriented. Her body ached and her clothes were singed, but she was alive. Around her, the manor lay in ruins. Charred beams, shattered windows, and ash-covered floors bore witness to the destruction that had just occurred. But the mirror remained intact, gleaming defiantly amidst the devastation. Cracks spiderwebbed across its surface, yet it seemed to pulse with life, glowing faintly in the dim light. Fragments of glass littered the ground, each shard reflecting distorted images of Evelyn's terrified face. She crawled toward the largest fragment, picking it up with trembling hands. As she stared into the jagged piece, she saw flashes of her earlier visions. The mountain of gold, the blood-soaked wasteland. But now they were accompanied by new scenes. Strangers gazing into mirrors, their expressions shifting from awe to terror as they too succumbed to the artifact's curse. "What? What are you?" Evelyn whispered, her voice hoarse from screaming. "I am eternity," the mirror replied softly. "I am memory, desire, regret. I am the keeper of truths too dangerous for mortal minds." Evelyn clutched the shard tightly, feeling its cold surface bite into her palm. Despite her fear, she couldn't bring herself to let go. Something about the mirror called to her, whispering secrets only she could hear. Dawn broke over Ravenwood Forest, casting pale golden light through the skeletal trees. Evelyn stumbled out of the ruined manor, clutching the shard of the mirror like a lifeline. Her mind was a whirlwind of confusion and dread, replaying the events of the night over and over again. Had it all been real, or had exhaustion and paranoia driven her to hallucinate? She wandered aimlessly for hours, her legs moving mechanically as her thoughts spiraled. Eventually, she emerged from the forest, finding herself miles away from where she'd entered. Villagers spotted her staggering along the edge of the woods and rushed to her aid, their faces etched with concern. "Are you hurt?" one woman asked, wrapping a blanket around Evelyn's shoulders. "What happened to you?" Evelyn opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Her eyes darted wildly, searching for some way to explain the horrors she'd endured. But how could she describe something so surreal, so incomprehensible? Instead, she simply handed them the shard of the mirror, its faint glow pulsing rhythmically in her palm. The villagers recoiled, crossing themselves and muttering prayers. "It's cursed," one man said gravely. "You shouldn't have gone into Ravenwood. That place is evil." Evelyn wanted to argue, to insist that she hadn't imagined any of it, but deep down she knew they were right. Something dark and ancient resided in that forest, and it had marked her forever. Back home, Evelyn struggled to piece together what had happened. She spent days poring over her journal, trying to make sense of the cryptic notes she'd scribbled during her research. Sleep eluded her, and when she did manage to drift off, nightmares plagued her dreams. She saw the mirror everywhere, in reflections and puddles, even in the blank screens of her laptop. The shard she'd brought back sat on her desk, glowing faintly at night. Sometimes she swore she heard whispers emanating from it, calling her name or urging her to return to Ravenwood. Other times it showed her fleeting glimpses of alternate realities, lives she might have lived if she'd made different choices. Desperate for answers, Evelyn delved deeper into folklore surrounding cursed objects. She discovered tales of mirrors used as portals to other realms. Realms where time, space, and identity blurred together. Some legends claim these mirrors trapped souls, feeding on their fears and regrets. Others suggested they revealed hidden truths, forcing viewers to confront aspects of themselves they'd rather forget. Could the mirror in Ravenwood be such an artifact? And if so, Why had it chosen her? Sleep became a luxury Evelyn could no longer afford. Every night, she tossed and turned, haunted by visions of the mirror and the alternate versions of herself it had shown her. In some dreams, she stood triumphant atop the mountain of gold, basking in adoration. In others, she wandered the desolate wasteland, surrounded by death and despair. Each scenario felt vividly real, leaving her breathless and sweating when she finally woke. One particularly harrowing night, Evelyn bolted upright in bed, certain she'd heard someone, or something, moving in her apartment. Her heart pounded as she scanned the darkness, half expecting to see glowing eyes staring back at her. When nothing materialized, she chalked it up to paranoia and tried to calm herself. But then she noticed the shard on her desk. It wasn't just glowing, it was pulsing, as though alive. Shadows danced across the walls, twisting into grotesque shapes that mimicked her movements. Evelyn grabbed the shard and hurled it into a drawer, slamming it shut before collapsing onto her bed. Yet even with the shard out of sight, she couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching her. Determined to regain control, Evelyn sought help from experts in the field of paranormal phenomena. She contacted professors, historians, and spiritualists, sharing her findings and asking for guidance. Most dismissed her claims as nonsense, attributing her experiences to stress or overactive imagination. But one individual, a retired archaeologist named Dr. Marcus Hale, took her seriously. Dr. Hale invited Evelyn to his secluded cabin, where he kept an extensive library of rare texts and artifacts. Together, they pored over ancient manuscripts detailing similar cases of cursed mirrors. One account described a mirror said to reveal the viewer's true self, often driving them mad in the process. Another mentioned a ritual used to destroy such artifacts, involving fire, salt, and sacred symbols. "You're dealing with something powerful," Dr. Hale warned. "If you want to break free, you'll need to confront it head on. But be careful. These things don't give up easily." Evelyn nodded, her resolve hardening. If destroying the mirror was the only way to end her torment, then she would do whatever it took. Armed with newfound knowledge and protective charms gifted by Dr. Hale, Evelyn prepared to return to Ravenwood. This time, she brought tools to document her findings: a camera, recording equipment, and a journal filled with notes on potential rituals. Deep down, she knew the risks, but the promise of understanding her visions compelled her onward. As she approached the forest, the air grew heavier, charged with an almost electric tension. The trees seemed taller, their branches reaching out like skeletal hands. The whispers returned, louder and more insistent than before. They spoke of danger, of madness, of doom. Evelyn ignored them, focusing instead on the task ahead. She followed the same path she'd taken during her first visit, her footsteps echoing eerily in the silence. When she reached the site of the ruined manor, she stopped, surveying the wreckage. The mirror was gone, but fragments of it still littered the ground, glowing faintly in the moonlight. Evelyn knelt beside them, gathering as many pieces as she could carry. With each shard she collected, the whispers grew louder, overlapping voices warning her to stop. But Evelyn pressed on, determined to complete her mission. The journey back to Ravenwood Forest was different this time. Evelyn felt a strange mix of dread and resolve as she stepped beneath the canopy of gnarled trees. The air was colder, heavier, as though the forest itself knew she had returned. Shadows stretched unnaturally long across the ground, and the whispers that had haunted her dreams now seemed louder, more insistent. "You shouldn't have come back," one voice hissed, its tone dripping with malice. "Turn around while you still can," another urged, almost pleading. Evelyn clenched her fists, trying to block out the cacophony of voices swirling around her. She focused on the shards of the mirror tucked safely in her satchel, their faint glow pulsing rhythmically against the fabric. They were her key to breaking free from the curse, or so she hoped. As she pressed deeper into the forest, the landscape shifted subtly. Trees twisted into unnatural shapes, their branches forming arches that resembled skeletal hands reaching for her. The path she remembered from her first visit was overgrown, forcing her to carve her way through thickets of thorns and brambles. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if the forest was actively resisting her return. Finally, after what felt like hours, Evelyn reached the clearing where the manor once stood. The ruins were even more desolate now, reduced to little more than charred beams and crumbling stone. Yet amidst the devastation, she sensed something. Alive. The ground beneath her feet vibrated faintly, and the air crackled with an otherworldly energy. She knelt beside the largest fragment of the mirror, placing it carefully on the ground. As she worked, the whispers grew louder, overlapping voices chanting in languages she didn't understand. Her hands trembled as she arranged the shards into a rough circle, following Dr. Hale's instructions to reconstruct the artifact before attempting to destroy it. Reassembling the mirror was no easy task. Each shard pulsed with its own eerie light, and when Evelyn touched them, flashes of visions assaulted her mind. Glimpses of alternate lives, forgotten memories, and shadowy figures gazing into mirrors. Some fragments resisted her efforts, sliding away from her fingers as though they had minds of their own. Others burned her skin, leaving red welts that stung long after she set them down. Despite the pain and confusion, Evelyn persisted. She used strips of cloth soaked in salt water to bind the pieces together, murmuring protective incantations she'd memorized from Dr. Hale's texts. Slowly but surely, the mirror began to take shape, a jagged, incomplete version of its former self, yet undeniably powerful. When the final shard clicked into place, the entire clearing erupted in a blinding flash of light. Evelyn shielded her eyes, stumbling backward as the ground shook violently beneath her feet. When the light faded, the mirror stood upright, its surface shimmering like liquid silver. It hummed softly, vibrating with an energy that made Evelyn's teeth ache. "Well done," the mirror's voice purred, smooth and mocking. "You've brought me back." Evelyn swallowed hard, her heart pounding in her chest. "I didn't bring you back to serve you," she spat, her voice trembling but defiant. "I'm here to destroy you." The mirror chuckled darkly, its laughter echoing through the clearing. "Destroy me?" "Oh, Evelyn, you misunderstand. I cannot be destroyed, not by someone like you. You're too weak, too afraid of what lies within yourself." "I'm not afraid anymore," Evelyn lied, clutching the ritual dagger Dr. Hale had given her. Its blade gleamed faintly, etched with runes designed to banish malevolent forces. "We'll see about that," the mirror whispered. The mirror's surface rippled, distorting Evelyn's reflection until it no longer resembled her. Instead, she saw a figure cloaked in shadows, its face obscured by darkness. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, piercing through her defenses and exposing every fear, every doubt, every regret she'd ever buried. "You think you can escape your past?" the figure taunted, its voice layered with countless others. "Your guilt? Your shame? Look closer, Evelyn. See who you truly are." Against her will, Evelyn found herself drawn to the mirror. Her reflection shifted again, showing her moments she tried to forget. Arguments with loved ones, mistakes she couldn't undo, choices that had hurt others. Each memory hit her like a physical blow, leaving her breathless and shaking. "No!" she screamed, tearing her gaze away. "This isn't real. None of this is real." "Oh, but it is," the mirror replied, its voice soft and cruel. "These are your truths, Evelyn, your burdens, and now they belong to me." Evelyn sank to her knees, overwhelmed by the weight of her own conscience. Tears streamed down her face as she realized the truth. The mirror wasn't just cursed, it was feeding on her fears, amplifying them until they consumed her entirely. But then, a spark of defiance ignited within her. She thought of all the people who had believed in her, the villagers who had warned her, Dr. Hale who had guided her, and even the strangers whose stories she'd uncovered during her research. They deserved answers, closure, justice, and she owed it to herself to fight back. Summoning every ounce of courage she had left, Evelyn rose to her feet. "You don't control me," she declared, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I won't let you." Though the mirror was gone, Evelyn knew its influence would linger. She carried its lessons with her, the importance of facing her fears, embracing her flaws, and seeking truth no matter how painful it might be. Back home, she published her findings, sharing the dangers of tampering with forces beyond comprehension. Her work earned her recognition in academic circles, but more importantly, it provided closure for those affected by similar curses. Yet part of her wondered if the mirror truly broke, or if it merely waited dormant for its next victim. As travelers continued to hear whispers in Ravenwood Forest, the legend of the cursed mirror lived on. For Evelyn, however, the journey had changed her forever. She learned that some mysteries are best left unsolved, but also that confronting the unknown could reveal strength she never knew she possessed. Would she have dared to gaze into the cursed mirror of Ravenwood again? Perhaps not, but she emerged stronger, wiser, and unafraid to face whatever challenges lay ahead.